Greetings citizens of the world, this is Anonymous. Before we start our message, keep in mind, we are not pro-Islam, we are 100% atheists. We only have an interest in the truth and the well-being of society. It has come to our attention that the so-called Reclaim Australia rallies that are going to be held in most capital cities across the country on April 4th are being organized and promoted by white supremacists, far right-wing extremists, neo-Nazis and Christian extremists. They are exploiting irrational fears of Islam in order to attract supporters to their rallies in an attempt to recruit people into their fascist movement. For example, the online video blogger Sherman Burgess, who calls himself the Great Aussie Patriot, has shared videos produced by the National Republican Guard, an explicitly neo-Nazi organization. In his videos, Sherman has stated how he would like to gas all Muslims, all Aboriginal people are scum, and he would kill all lefties if the police did not exist. The Reclaim Australia rally's intended goal is to stop the increasing Islamication of Australia. The Islamication of Australia simply is not happening. Fears of a Muslim's takeover, and Sharia law, are completely irrational. Muslims are 2% of the population here, less than the number of Buddhists. Muslims that are extremists make up about 0.0001% of the population. They have no meaningful political influence. The Women's Country Association has a larger political influence and is more likely to take over Australia than Muslim groups. The combination of ignorance of what the vast majority of Muslims believe, and corporate media playing up fear of terrorist groups like ISIS, and the terrorist attack in Martin Place has led to an increase in the hostility towards Muslims, and the idea Islam is to blame for all of this. Myths like Muslims cut off the clitoris of girls are used to dehumanize Muslims. The cutting off clitoris of young girls is only practiced in North Africa. It is a North African problem, not a Muslim problem, and the practice only started after the Europeans violently conquered and subjected North Africa. Another rumor made by bigots is that Muslims are not taking a stand against Islamic extremists. It seems they have not been paying attention to the massive global campaigns by Muslims to condemn groups like ISIS. For example, in Sydney, no Islamic funeral service was willing to engage with the murder in Martin Place. Also, the issue of Islamic terrorism, it is often conveniently ignored how Western governments have crushed democratic secular movements within the Middle East, and have been willing to support certain extremist strains of Islam. Furthermore, ISIS developed within the context of bombing Iraq for over 20 years. Many of the people fighting for ISIS likely would have been only 5 or 10 years old when this started. All they have known is war, and in such uncertain climates it is easy for fascist ideologies to take power, just like it did in the ruins and confusion of a defeated Germany after World War I. The wars in Iraq led to the death of over 1 million civilians, and put the entire population into poverty. It is said some of these bigots promoting the Reclaim Australia rallies are numb to the reality of over 1 million civilians dying. The war not only hurt Iraqis, it also hurt people here in Australia. The war in Iraq was based on a lie. It was said that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and this was the reason given for the invasion. It was eventually revealed that Iraq did not possess these weapons. Many Australian soldiers returned from Iraq with post-traumatic stress disorder and with very little support services available for them, which then led to massive rates of homelessness, family breakdowns and suicide among the veterans who returned from Iraq. The largest protest in Australian history was against the war in Iraq. The government and the capitalists that control it ignored the greatest public display of democratic will in Australian history. Yet we were told by our government we were bringing democracy to Iraq while obviously not having one here at home. The war in Iraq also hurt Australians in the form of the wasted billions of tax dollars that were spent on the war. Sadly, these Reclaim Australia rallies miss these very important points. Ideally, if this context was understood correctly, these rallies would be called Reclaim Australia from corrupt politicians and corporate lobby groups that profited from illegal war crimes. It is also said how these far-right neo-Nazi groups are causing people to worry about the introduction of Sharia law, something which is simply never going to happen in Australia. It is an absolute impossibility, particularly while corporations are literally writing our current laws. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is a trade deal led by the United States which will see corporations having the right to sue governments for writing laws that prevent them from making profits. For example, under a similar trade agreement led by the United States between Canada, Mexico and the US called NAFTA, a local district government in Canada decided it wanted to stop coal seam gas mining out of health concerns for the local population. The local government was taken to the International Court of Settlements and had to pay $200 million of tax money to the mining corporation for losses of profit. Such a system is being rushed into Australia. There is already coal seam gas mining happening within Sydney's city limits with potential cancer-causing effects on the local population. These new laws will also see massive changes to internet freedoms and the affordability of medicines. It is not halal food that is bringing the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement to Australia. It is not Islam that makes you have to wait in traffic every morning on the way to work in order to make some corporation rich while you earn a paltry wage. It is not Muslims that take you to wars that last decades that are based on lies. It is capitalism and the state. Fight the real enemy. Fight the ruling class. It is also said that our Aboriginal brothers and sisters are being made refugees in their own country through forced closure of their remote communities, and that refugees from wars Australia and its allies have encouraged or started have fled here, leading to children being raped in concentration camps. It really highlights the stupidity of these Reclaim Australia rallies and the false, misguided morality behind them. All these rallies will do is incite random acts of violence towards Muslims. People who were incorrectly presumed to be Muslims by bigots have been attacked. A New Zealand man with a thick beard was bashed on the Gold Coast because he was thought to be a Muslim, and a Sikh temple was vandalized. All these rallies will do is encourage this type of insanity. They are also work against the interests of the working class by distracting them from the real source of social problems and by promoting division among the working class. People united will never be defeated, but people divided between race, gender, religion, and sexuality will always be defeated. Do not let neo-Nazis and white supremacists manipulate you, or others, into thinking bigotry and fascism are the answers to an increasingly complex and corrupt world. These people have no morals. They have been caught using the name of the Anzacs in order to promote their political ideology. They talk about respecting the Anzacs, yet they do not seem to realize that using the name of dead Anzacs to sell their fascist ideology or to sell beer holders is extremely disrespectful to the memory of the Anzacs. Please attend the counter rallies to the Reclaim Australia rallies in order to show that more people are against bigotry and racism than for it. We owe it to those that fought against fascism in the 1930s and the 1940s. We owe it to those that stood against the forces of fascism on the street in the 1980s and 1990s, and we also owe it to future generations to stop fascism. Please share this video and invite all of your friends to the counter rallies. By attending the counter rallies you will help stop these racist and fascist ideas spreading in our society. Remember this quote: only one thing could have broken our movement. If our enemies had understood its principles and from the first day had smashed the nucleus of our movement with extreme brutality. Adolf Hitler. No room for racism and bigotry in Australia. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.